Ready? All right, so we're going to finish off with the high shine portion of our polishing. And I've cleaned off the dentures as you see here. I've put them in water so they're not just sitting on our benches. If they're not being used for whatever reason, you might want to do the high shine hours later or the day after. So make sure you store the dentures in water when you're not working on them. So I'll set that off to the side. And one thing I want to point out here, if we look at the polishing unit, I have some residue on the knobs here from the pumice. So wipe that off so you don't contaminate your hands and possibly introduce all those little fine particles to the high shine portion. And I'm going to clean off the little spindle here and wipe off my hands. So make sure everything is nice and clean. One thing you might have noticed up until now, whenever you're using rotary instruments, whether it's your handpiece or your lathe or a polishing unit, make sure you're not wearing gloves, because gloves can get caught up in the action here and could cause a problem. So work with bare hands. Okay, so for this portion, all we need is a wheel that we're going to use exclusively only for the high shine portion. So you don't want to put this wheel back to the pumice or use a wheel that you've used with a pumice for high shine. It doesn't work. You have to keep this separate. And this could last you a long time. Okay, so I'm going to mount my wheel. Before I do, I want to mention a few things. We have two items here. One is called the Tripoli. I'm not sure if it shows on camera. And this is a little more abrasive than this one here, the yellow high shine. This is less abrasive. So you can start off with this, and then we'll finish off with a less abrasive polisher. So I'm going to turn it on high with vacuum. And I'm going to start off with the Tripoli and introduce some material to the wheel. You can see it changing color. Make sure you wear eye protection and a mask. You don't want to be breathing all the stuff in. Although the unit does have suction, it's still going to be in the air. So I'm going to start off again the same sequence by high shining the periphery, not the underside. A little bit on the border back here, but not much. Now in the palette, you can use low speed to get a little more flex under the wheel, or perhaps cut the outer seam to get a little bit closer in here. I haven't polished the teeth yet. Nothing on the teeth. Just on the acrylic base only so far. Add a little more Tripoli. Place that back in the water and continue with the lower. It really doesn't matter where you start and finish as long as you cover the whole base. And again, I'm going to use the edge of the wheel on either side to get in between the little concavity between the periphery and the gingival roll. Back to the periphery. You can certainly do this in low speed if you wish, but adjust your pressure accordingly.
think that's about as far as I can go with the Tripoli. Everything looks nice and shiny. No scratches anywhere. If you did have any scratches that you didn't see before, you might want to go back to the pumice and get rid of them and continue with your high shine. So the next step, I'm going to take the high shine bar on high speed, turn it back down to low speed, inside the palette, all around the facial of the denture, and the underside of the periphery, just a little bit of the posterior border here, inside the frenal attachments, using the edge of the wheel. Minimize the contact, or at least the pressure you're applying up against the teeth. Continue with the lower, finish that off. And again, place your fingers very close to the area that you're trying to high shine to eliminate the possibility of the denture flying off your hands and maybe breaking, especially for the lower. So around the periphery now. And the last little bit, when this brush or this wheel has hardly any residue of Tripoli or high shine, there's enough on there to go over the teeth now to minimize the abrasion on the teeth. I'm going to use very little pressure and gently go over the facial aspect of the teeth and the lingual surfaces, as well as the occlusal. Very little pressure. I'll do the same thing with the upper. You can maybe be a little more aggressive when you're high shining the occlusal surfaces and the lingual surfaces, but be very, very gentle when you're high shining the facial. Because if you overdo it, you're going to eliminate all of the anatomy around the teeth. And you're done. So, a couple of things before we move to the next step. It's always a good idea to use some kind of surface disinfectant to spray anything that you've used, whether it be the wheel. This is to prevent any cross-contamination. Not so much this one, because this is going to get very wet. Okay. I'm going to spray the dentures with Biotex or Biosurf, whatever you have at hand. Spray it. We're going to place it inside our ultrasonic cleaner to get rid of some of the residue that's stuck on here, especially on the tissue side. I don't want to go in there with a brush, and possibly some of the residue that's stuck into proximately. So we're going to spray that with Biotex, place it inside the ultrasonic for about 5-10 minutes, and then on the next video we'll fabricate the clinical remount casts. Also a good idea, any pumice that you've used, is to get rid of it, because there might be some cross-contamination. Not so critical here if you're working on new cases, but if you're working on a repair, if you're doing a reline or a repair or tooth addition for an existing client, there's a possibility of cross-contamination here. So it's always a good idea to use fresh pumice on every case, okay? And of course, after you're done, you gotta wipe the unit down and get it ready for the next one. And wipe it down with some surface wipes that we have here, so there's no possibility of any cross-contamination.